All right, so I hope you can see the screen. We are looking at a simple mass of the, we'll start with a simple Keynesian system, okay? Uh, in this system, at equilibrium, we assume that output is equal to aggregate expenditure, okay? So Y should be equal to E. And we know that our expenditure is the spending made by individuals or consumers known as consumption. The expenditure made by firms called the investment, and then the spending of the government called the GIN, the government expenditure. Okay, so this is the initial equilibrium point that we'll be using. That's what they mean by ex ante before the model. This is the equilibrium condition that we are holding. Okay, but we also know that when you have Marvin is here.
Santa. I think God is a Santa.
Marvin, you are welcome. You are welcome. We are happy you could join us after what happened to you, but you've managed to be here. You are such a darling Santa. Marvin, I hope you still have control over your vocal box.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
God is a Santa.
We thank God. We thank God. We thank God. We thank God. Your sisters too are here, so I'm sure they are backing you with the moral support. Okay, right. So let's continue. We also know that when you have your income, okay, Marvin, we just started, okay. When you have your income, it's either you consume it, you save it, or you pay part as what? Tax. So our income is seen as the sum of consumption, savings, and then the tax, the value of tax that the individual will pay to the government. So with equality, we can say that instead of this Y, we can put the sum of CS and then T here. So CI should be equal to CS and then T. That's what we have here. So we can cancel the C out. So canceling the C out, we are getting the sum of investment and government expenditure should be the same as the sum of savings and then taxation. Okay. So this means that the injections are the same as what? The leakages. Okay. Savings and taxes are seen as leakages in a secular term. Okay. It's taken away from the national income, and then investment and government expenditure is adding up to the national income. So this part is the injection, and then this part is the leakage. Okay, is a leakage. So at equilibrium, per the ex ante definition, is either Y is equal to government expenditure, aggregate expenditure, or when we add investment and government expenditure, we are supposed to get the same as when we add savings and then taxation. Okay, so in case you are asked to find equilibrium Y, depending on the variables that you'll be given, you can choose to use the leakages and then the injections approach, or you can just straight away use the output market where we equate Y to expenditure. Okay, right. So let's look at the components of aggregate demand. What are the components of aggregate demand? The first one is consumption. Okay, and the consumption variable in this model is endogenous, which means that its value is determined in the model. I just know that this model that we are talking about is Y, the equilibrium national income that we are talking about. So any variable that depends on income is taken as endogenous. okay, because the consumption will always vary with the level of income. Okay, there's an assumption that the higher your level of income, the higher the level of consumption. Okay, so consumption varies with income. That is why we are saying consumption is endogenous variable. So mathematically, the consumption is a function of y, holding all other things constant. Your consumption is supposed to depend on the level of income. And then generally, this is the specified equation for co- consumption according to Keynes. Okay, that the level of consumption should be equal to the sum of a certain autonomous spending. Okay, the A here is the amount of consumption when your disposable income is zero. Even if you don't have anything at all, if you don't have money, you still consume something. Okay, that is what this A captures. And this B, I'm sure we all know this already, the marginal propensity to consume, the change in consumption resulting from a unit change in the disposable income. Okay, so your consumption depends on the autonomous component and then the disposable income. And our disposable income is your income less tax. Okay, so YD is your Y minus the level of tax. Okay, all right, so this is what I was talking about. When you draw your consumption function, the B is the gradient of that function and the A is the vertical intercept. Okay, so the consumption function doesn't start from zero. It doesn't start from zero because even if your income is zero, there's still a certain level of uh, consumption. Even if you don't have money, you still wear something. Okay, so the shirt that you are wearing is a sort of consumption. You are consuming the shirt. Okay, so whether you have money or not, it's even possible you listen to music. That one too is a form of consumption. Okay, right. As I said, the YD is our disposable income. Okay, so because of the positive relationship between consumption and then between consumption and Y. As your Y changes, so will the level of consumption also change. Okay, so if we want to measure the effect of changes in income on the changes in consumption, that is where we use our marginal propensity to consume. Okay, when you differentiate the production function with respect to income, change in C should be equal to the marginal propensity to consume times the disposable income. So if disposable income should change by 1 unit, then the consumption is going to change by the value of B, that is the marginal propensity to consume. Okay, so change in C should be equal to uh, B times your change in D. So making the marginal propensity to consume the subject, that should be your change in C resulting from a change in YD. So marginal propensity to consume is dC dy, the change in C resulting from a unit change in the YD. Okay, so this is how to get your marginal propensity to consume. So in case you are giving a consumption function and you are to use mass or calculus to find your marginal propensity to consume, just differentiate your consumption function with respect to disposable income. Okay. Any question? Any question? All right. So let's move on. Okay, and then savings. Savings too is a variable in this model. That one too is being taken as endogenous. Okay, because we are taking consumption as uh, endogenous. Savings just means not consuming. So the money that you have, if you don't consume it, it means that you are saving it. Okay. And now we know our official consumption function. Okay. This is the consumption function. And we know that the level of income is equivalent to the sum of your savings, your consumption, and then the tax that you pay. Okay. And then we said that Okay, and then we said that the disposable income is your income minus the level of tax. Okay, so from here, y minus t should be equal to the sum of consumption and then savings. Okay, so y minus t is our disposable income. Okay, so making s the subject here, we are getting s is equal to yd minus c. 1 minute. It means any man and so. Right, so our savings is equal to disposable income minus the consumption level. Okay, that is from here. Y should be equal, S should be equal to the YD. I mean, it's Y minus T minus C, and Y minus T is our disposable income. So S should be equal to disposable income minus the level of uh, consumption. But we know that our consumption is the sum of the autonomous and then the income induced component. Okay, so substituting this for the C, we'll have YD minus the autonomous minus the income induced component. So we have S is equal to YD minus A minus BYD. Okay. So now S should be equal to minus A, then YD minus BYD. So we could just factor the YD out. So the savings function is giving us minus A. Then we have our 1 minus B uh, times the disposable income. So what this also means is that as your income is changing, so does your level of savings. Okay, the higher the level of income, the higher the level of savings. Okay, so this one too, if you want to measure the change in savings resulting from a change in disposable income, you differentiate your savings function with respect to your disposable income. So the S, the YD should be equal to 1 minus B. Okay, 1 minus B. Okay, so if you want to know the amount that savings is going to change if disposable income should change by 1 unit, you divide the AS by changing YD. So the S, the YD becomes the 1 minus B. The 1 minus B is the marginal propensity to save. Okay, so 1 minus marginal propensity to consume is marginal propensity to save. In your free time, just prove that if marginal propensity to consume is B, then the marginal propensity to save is 1 minus B. Did you get a question? Use
No.
use calculus to prove that if marginal propensity to consume is B, then the marginal propensity to save is 1 minus B. Did you get that?
Yes.
Okay, so you cannot try that when you are free. It's just like some 4 lines, people. Okay. All right. Okay. So now we've spoken about consumption and then savings. We are still on the components of the AD, and investment too is part. Okay, investment is part. Government expenditure too is part. We are assuming that these are exogenous variables for the simple Keynesian model. We are just assuming that these variables are going to enter the model with their own uh, values. Okay, they don't depend on any of the variables in the model. It's just an assumption. So we'll take investment as I0. Okay, it won't always be like that, but for now, we are assuming that investment is autonomous just because we are holding interest rate constant. Last week we saw that investment depends on interest rate. Okay, but now we are assuming that interest rate is constant. So if interest rate is constant, then investment is exogenous. But we are going to relax that assumption later. Investment can even depend on the level of income when we start with the ISLM. we will see that even investment doesn't only depend on interest rate, but it also depends on the level of income. Okay, so I for now will be taken as I0. As for Jane, it will always be taken as autonomous in this course. But don't be surprised. Government expenditure too depends on the national income. But for this level, we are just assuming Jane 2 is autonomous. But for taxes, taxes can be exogenous or endogenous depending on uh, the kind of policy that the government wants. It can just be autonomous when the total tax is equal to the lump sum tax. So this one, the tax doesn't depend on income. But when we bring the income induced component, that's the tax rate, then you see that the total tax will depend on the lump sum tax and then the income induced tax, which is the tax rate times the level of national income. Okay, so T is equal to T0 and then the T1. All right, so these are the components of the, how do we call it, the aggregate demand function. Okay, consumption, savings, investment, government expenditure, and then the tax. Okay, so now we are saying that output, which is Y, is equivalent to aggregate supply. Okay, and also uh, expenditure is equal to aggregate demand. And we stated earlier that Y is equal to E. When your income is equal to your expenditure, it means that aggregate supply to is equal to what? Aggregate demand. We said E is the sum of consumption, investment, and then government expenditure. This is the simple model. We are even assuming that there's no international trade. We know that when we add international trade, then aggregate demand changes. But this one is just a simple model. So uh, expenditure is just the sum of consumption, investment, and government spending. Okay. So this means that at equilibrium, AS is equal to AD or Y is equal to E. Okay, Y is equal to E, which means that Y should be equal to the sum of consumption, investment, and then government expenditure. And these are the definitions for the various components. This is the consumption function as stated by Keynes. And then this is the disposable income, which is Y minus T. For now, we are taking the tax to be just autonomous. So T is equal to T0, I is equal to I0, and Gen2 is equal to Gen0. Okay, we'll relax all this, but for now, we are just taking this. Okay, any question? Any question?
No.
Okay. Okay, so this is going to be the equilibrium point. Okay, so this is the equilibrium condition. Okay, this is the equilibrium condition. So now we know that C, this is C, right? C, the YD is our YT minus 0. YD is equal to YT minus 0. Abba, you are welcome.
Thank you.
Marvin too is here. Okay, so this is our consumption level. This is investment, and then this is government expenditure. So we are trying to derive the equilibrium national income or output. Okay, right. So Y is equal to this one. We just expanded the income induced consumption. We have BY minus BT0. Then the investment is here, government expenditure too is here. So now grouping like terms, we are bringing this Y here. We have Y minus BY is equal to A minus BT0, I0, and then G0. Okay. So we factor Y out. When we factor Y out, we are getting 1 minus B is equal to A minus BT0, I0, and then the Gene zero. So if we want to make y the subject, we just divide through by 1 minus b. You see, you've done all these things before, right? Yeah, so these are just things that you already know. Just that here will be adding those policy myths just to know what is going to happen in the economy. So we are getting our y star to be what? Y star is equal to 1 over 1 minus b times a minus b t zero I zero and then the gene zero. So we call this portion, this one from a to the gene zero, we call it the autonomous expenditure. All these components are independent of y. They are all exogenous components. A doesn't depend on y, BT0 doesn't depend on y, and then I and Gen2 are, as we know already, are exogenous. Okay, so these ones are called the autonomous expenditure. And then we come to our 1 over 1 minus b. How do we call the 1 over 1 minus b?
And then you go.
How do we, Marvin, how do we call the 1 over 1 minus b?
The multiplier.
Okay, so in case you have a question, we normally represent it by k. Okay, this is a simple one because we are talking about the simple Keynesian model. Okay, using only the lump sum tax. Okay, so but we'll be representing the 1 over 1 minus b by k. Okay, and then we normally represent the autonomous uh, expenditure A. So if this part is K, then we are having K by, we represent this whole portion by A bar, this part, the A to the gen zero, okay? So our Y star should be equal to K times A, is equal to K times A. Okay, so now what we are trying to do now is to look at the changes in y resulting from an exogenous change in any of these components. If tax should increase or decrease, how is it going to affect the national income? If investment should change, if the government should change its spending, how will it affect your national income? So what we need to do is we will differentiate. If you want the effect of tax on y, you differentiate y with respect to the tax. Okay, you differentiate y with respect, that's what they are calling the delta. Okay, so first one, if there's a change in autonomous consumption, then its effect on y is going to be the k times
Please come again. The tax.
tax. The tax part, what I was trying to say, if there should be any change in tax, being it a decrease or an increase, how is that going to affect y? So you just differentiate y with respect to tax. The value that you get
Oh, okay. Okay.
should be the effect on y resulting from a unit change in tax. Okay, so we are starting from the A. So if there should be a change in autonomous um, consumption, then if you want its effect on y, then it's the k times what? The change in A. So if assuming we have our k to be say 5, this k is normally 5 or 4. If you get 10, be careful. 5 times, let's say the change in A is like 200 units. Okay, so if A should change by 200, then Y is not just going to change by 200, it is going to change by more than 200 units. And that amount is going to be the K, which is 5 times the 200, which is like 1,000, right? So if A should change by 200 units, assuming K is 5, then Y is going to change by 1,000 units. And know that the sign is positive, the coefficient here is positive. And as a result, there's a direct relationship between y and then a. So as a is increasing, so will y. Okay, so will y. All right, so that is for the effect of autonomous consumption on national income. And then for investment, the same way you differentiate Y with respect to investment, and that one too is your K times I. So with a similar analogy, if investment should increase, there's going to be an increase in Y because of the positive coefficient. So if I should increase by 100 units, then it's that 100 units times the value of the K, and that should be the change in Y. If you want it with respect to J, you do the same thing. You differentiate Y with respect to J. Okay, so that one too, we are getting our K. We'll call that one KJ, we'll call this KI, this will be KA. The last one, tax. Check the tax one, okay? For tax, when you differentiate Y with respect to T, you'll be getting minus B over 1 minus B, okay? So the value that you get here, the minus B over 1 minus B, should be the value, the change in Y, which will result from a unit change in tax. So if tax should increase, but this one, let's take note of the sign. Okay, you see that this one, the sign is what? Is negative, which means that if there's an increase in tax, there's supposed to be a reduction in Y. Why is it that when we increase tax, then income will reduce? Why? Who can help me? Adwasawa.
The brain.
Why did you want OWAS to win? Your voice is a bit low.
No, I'm having some stomach upset.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
F what's in free me so what?
then I guess we can move to Oduniama.
Oh. Oh, I can talk.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry.
Why is it that if there's an increase in tax, there's a reduction in income, in national income?
Let's say when there is an increase in tax with income being constant, when you deduct the tax, the increase in tax from your income, it reduces your disposable income.
I'm not talking about disposable income. I'm talking about effect of tax on national income, national equilibrium income. Crystal, can you help?
Sir, please, could you repeat the question?
I'm saying that with an increase in tax, there's supposed to be a decrease in Y. Why? When we increase tax, there's a reduction in national income. Why?
Sir, please, I'm not sure.
So just say what
To be
you're not
honest.
sure about.
Sir, please, can you ask someone else?
Who?
Maybe Lizzie.
Lizzie?